It started with a sketch, one pencil line, then another, and before she knew it, Vanessa Ellington had drawn a pair of eyes that weren't hers, but looked exactly like the boy sitting 2 seats away. The community art class at Southside Cultural Center wasn't where people like Vanessa usually spent their Tuesday nights. Most girls from wealthy families like hers were at Soul Cycle or charity banquets. But Vanessa hated both. She preferred silence, paper, and the feeling of being seen, not judged, especially for her weight. And Derek Carter? He never looked at her like she was a joke. He was thin to the point of looking breakable. Tall, wiry, always in the same faded gray hoodie and scuffed-up black Converse. He rarely spoke in class, but his sketches, they had soul. They breathed. Vanessa noticed he only drew with mechanical pencils, no eraser. Like he believed every line mattered. Every mistake told part of the truth. One evening, as the instructor dismissed class, Derek lingered by the door. Vanessa gathered her supplies and noticed a folded sheet of paper had been slipped beneath her sketchbook. It was a drawing, a portrait of her, done in just a few strokes. Her smile soft, kind open, like someone had finally seen past the jokes, past the labels, past the weight. There was a note at the bottom in tight, clean handwriting. You look the way you feel when you laugh. D. That night, she didn't sleep. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't hate her reflection. Over the weeks, they started staying late after class, talking, sharing pieces of themselves in quiet corners. Derek told her about his mom, Sharon, a woman who sold handmade candles and bracelets at the weekend flea market and worked nights at a nursing home. He never mentioned a father. Just, it was always me and her. Vanessa talked about how exhausting it was being the fat, rich girl. People either pitted her, tried to fix her, or used her. No one just listened. But Derek did. He never tried to flatter her. He asked questions, real ones, about her art, her childhood, her dreams. And when he laughed, which was rare, it lit up his whole face. Vanessa felt weightless around him, like the world stopped measuring her for once. Derek had never been the boy who got picked. Not on the playground, not in group projects, and certainly not when it came to love. Growing up in a decaying apartment complex off Memorial Drive, he learned quickly that being poor wasn't just a financial condition. It was a brand. It clung to your shoes, your breath, your name. Kids didn't say Derek. They said that broke boy. Even teachers hesitated to call on him unless they were handing out detention. His mother, Sharon, did her best. She worked 2 jobs, home health aide by night, flea market vendor by weekend. Her hands always smelled like lavender and cleaning chemicals. She never complained, only reminded him, softly, you don't have to be rich to be respected. Just be kind and sharp and clean. But kindness doesn't pay school lunch. And sharpness doesn't get you invited to prom. In high school, Derek once mustered the courage to ask a girl to the winter formal. He spent a week practicing in front of the mirror. The night he asked, she laughed in his face. You ain't even got a car, Derek. How you gonna take me anywhere? The laughter stuck. It followed him like a shadow. He stopped asking questions, stopped making eye contact, started sketching more. Pencils didn't laugh. Paper didn't judge. There was one particularly brutal memory he could never shake. He was 13. His mother had saved up to buy him a used North Face jacket from Goodwill, 2 sizes too big, but you'll grow into it. On the way home, they stopped at a gas station. Sharon went inside while Derek waited outside by the air pump, showing off the jacket to his reflection in a dirty car window. That's when a white man in a truck rolled down the window and spat a wad of phlegm onto the ground near his feet. Still gonna look like trash, jacket or not, the man muttered. Derek didn't move, didn't cry, just looked at his reflection again. He never wore the jacket. By the time he turned 21, Derek had accepted that some people were born into banquet halls and others into food lines. He didn't resent the rich. He just never expected them to see him. So when Vanessa did, really saw him, something in him cracked. She wasn't like the others. She didn't flinch when he said his mom worked nights. She didn't scoff when he said he'd never been on a plane. She just listened, and that was enough. He remembered one night they stayed behind after art class, sitting on the floor, backs against the wall, legs stretched out, fingers barely touching. Vanessa had asked him, "Do you ever wish you could start over?" Derek looked at her and said, "No, I just wish I had a fair shot." She squeezed his hand. That night, he walked home in the rain and didn't feel wet. But even love, when it's fragile, can't erase old wounds. It only hides them under silk sheets and warm voices. Every time he walked past the Ellingtons' gates, the smell of old money wrapped around his neck like a noose. The housekeepers glanced at him like he was furniture. The neighbors locked their doors when he walked by. And deep inside, something started to whisper, "You don't belong here. They're letting you in like a pet, not like a person." She'll wake up and see it one day. He didn't want to believe it, but memories are louder than reassurances. And shame has a long echo. So by the time fall arrived, Derek wasn't just falling in love. He was falling into a fantasy, one where love could fix things, one where the boy from the project could sit at the table with crystal glasses and linen napkins, and not just serve but belong. It was foolish, naive, but it was the only dream he'd ever had that felt warm, and that made it dangerous. By late fall, they were officially together, though that word meant different things to different people. To Derek, it meant he had someone who made the world feel bearable. To Vanessa, it meant she finally had a man who didn't see her as a project. But to the Ellingtons, it meant trouble. The first time Vanessa brought Derek home was a disaster. The Ellington estate was 3 acres of manicured lawns and glass windows in Peachtree Heights, Atlanta. It screamed money, history, and standards. Derek arrived in his Sunday best, pressed shirt, black slacks, new shoes his mom had helped pay for. He held a bouquet of tulips and a trembling smile. Charles Ellington barely looked up from his scotch. Monica Ellington offered a cold handshake and a glance that scanned him like TSA. "So," she said, "you go to Morehouse?" "No, ma'am. I took some classes at Fulton Tech. I work at Janine's Cafe on Piedmont." Silence. Vanessa reached for Derek's hand under the table. Dinner was awkward. Small talk turned sharp. Charles made jokes that weren't jokes. "You know, Vanessa used to date a lawyer's son. Big boy at Stanford. Real future ahead of him." "I'm not a big fan of lawyers," Derek said softly. "Because they cost money?" Charles smirked. Later that night, Monica cornered Vanessa in the kitchen. "You know he's only here because of the money, right?" she whispered. "Don't embarrass us. And God forbid, don't get pregnant." Vanessa cried the entire ride back to Derek's apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom off Glenwood Avenue, where he lived with his mom. Sharon made hot chocolate and let her vent. She called her sweetheart and wrapped her in a shawl like she was her own. It was the first time Vanessa felt at home. And maybe that's what doomed everything. Derek started visiting the Ellington home more regularly after that, when Charles was traveling and Monica had her Botox sessions. He never went past the foyer without permission, but one person always came running when he showed up. Little Emma Ellington, Vanessa's baby sister. 1 year old, curls like a halo, always barefoot. She called him DD and insisted on him reading her picture books in a deep voice. Derek adored her, said she was the only person in that house with a clean heart. Some Sundays, the 3 of them would sit in the garden, Vanessa sketching, Emma on Derek's lap babbling nonsense, and Derek humming low under his breath. Those were the moments Derek wanted to freeze, because every other moment, the reminders came crashing back. The stolen glances from the housekeepers. The way Charles had hired a private investigator to look into Derek's background. The way Monica referred to him as that stray dog you keep feeding. But Derek didn't leave. He loved Vanessa. Fiercely. Desperately. And part of him believed, truly believed, that love could rewrite the rules. That one day, the Ellingtons would see him for who he really was. That they'd understand. He even saved up for a ring. A thin, simple silver band with a tiny opal, Vanessa's birthstone. He planned to propose on Thanksgiving. The holiday was always messy for both of them. Her family saw it as a performance. His mom usually worked a double shift and brought home leftover turkey. But this year would be different. He told himself that over and over. This year, they'd start their own family. This year, they'd be free. What Derek didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Vanessa had already made a choice. And it wasn't him. Vanessa Ellington sat at the edge of her bed, the dim light from her vanity reflecting off a gold-framed photo of her family. Her hair was still damp from the shower. Her phone screen lit up for the third time in 10 minutes. Derek again. She didn't open it. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't. The truth was, she still loved him. But love felt different inside a house like the Ellingtons. It wasn't a feeling. It was a liability. She remembered the night Monica cornered her in the walk-in closet. "He's beneath you, Vanessa," her mother had said, folding a silk blouse. "And if you don't let this go, you'll lose everything we've built for you." Vanessa had replied, trembling, "He's not asking for any of it." "That's exactly the problem," Monica snapped. "He doesn't want to take. He wants to belong. And we don't hand out belonging like coupons." It was one of those moments that sat in your chest like ice, too cold to cry, too hot to forget. Weeks later, Charles called her into his study. "I've arranged for you to meet someone," he said, sliding a photo across the desk. A man in a tailored suit, standing beside a white sports car. Vanessa stared at the picture, silent. "He's from a good family," Charles continued. "Knows how to carry himself. And unlike the candle boy, he won't drag you down." The phrase candle boy hit harder than he knew, because that's what Derek had made for her birthday, a candle. Lavender, with a label that read, "You're the only light I never doubted." It was still in her drawer, unlit, untouched, like so many things she wanted but didn't dare reach for. A month before Thanksgiving, she found out she was pregnant. She didn't tell Derek. She told no one except the clinic nurse who held her hand when she signed the termination papers. It wasn't rage or shame that made her end it. It was fear. Fear of being disowned. Fear of losing status. Fear that the baby would grow up knowing it was never truly accepted. Vanessa told herself it was mercy, but it didn't feel like mercy. It felt like betrayal. In her journal, kept under the false bottom of her makeup drawer, she wrote, "I see him in Emma's sometimes. The way he rocks her, how she clings to him like he's home. And I wonder, would our child have clung to him the same way?" She never answered that question. Some questions are better left unanswered. The week before Thanksgiving, Vanessa drafted a message to Derek. "Come after dinner. I'll meet you in the garden. I'll tell them. I promise." She never hit send. Instead, she let the phone screen go dark, just like she let him drift away. When he showed up uninvited at the house, her heart jumped, not from fear but guilt. Seeing him in the foyer, holding that ring box, eyes full of broken hope, she felt like the smallest, worst version of herself. And when her mother called him a stray, and when her father mocked his clothes, and when she said nothing at all, that's when she killed him. Not with knives, not with poison, but with silence. And silence, she would later learn, was more deadly than hate. Thanksgiving came early that year. Or maybe it just felt early, rushed, forced. Vanessa hadn't spoken to Derek in almost a week. Her texts had turned vague. Her tone clipped. "I just need space. My parents are watching everything now. Don't show up uninvited." And yet, Derek showed up anyway. Not with rage. Not with demands. with a ring box in his coat pocket and a half-broken heart in his chest. He stood outside the Ellington estate for nearly 20 minutes. The sun had just begun to set, casting golden light across the driveway lined with imported marble lions. Cars filled the circular entrance, black SUVs, luxury sedans, a few Bentleys. Family had arrived. Derek smoothed his jacket, adjusted his collar, and walked up the steps. Vanessa's cousin answered the door, a boy in a pastel suit who looked like he'd never been punched in his life. His eyes narrowed when he saw Derek. "Are you catering?" "No," Derek said. "I'm here for Vanessa." The cousin smirked and stepped aside. Bold. Inside, the estate buzzed with southern charm wrapped in snide superiority. Classical music played softly beneath the din of socialite laughter. Glasses clinked. Jewelry flashed. Every room smelled like fresh orchids and expensive secrets. Derek found Vanessa near the hallway, speaking with a tall, light-skinned man in a white turtleneck. Handsome, confident, familiar. The kind of man her parents had likely handpicked. When she saw Derek, her face froze. "Derek, what are you doing here?" His voice cracked. "I needed to see you." She stepped forward, lowering her voice. "You can't be here. I brought something. I was going to ask you something." "Derek, please don't." Behind them, Monica Ellington appeared with a glass of champagne in hand, her heels clicking like accusations. "Well," she said, loud enough for the room to hush, "the stray is back." Derek stiffened. Monica smiled coldly. "Did someone let you in? Or did you sneak past security like you people tend to do?" "Mom, stop," Vanessa said. But Monica wasn't done. "Do you know what it looks like? You showing up here uninvited? Do you know what people are whispering about you and my daughter?" She leaned in. "Do you know what they're whispering about your mother?" Derek's jaw tightened. "Don't talk about my mother." "Oh, I've met your mother," Monica said, swirling her glass. "Sweet woman. I think I bought soap from her once, at the flea market. Or was it candles? Either way, she tried very hard to seem like a lady. But you can't buy class, can you?" The hallway fell silent. Vanessa turned away. "And Derek?" He walked out. No words, no proposal. Just a black ring box growing heavier in his coat with every step. His mother, Sharon, died 2 days later. Massive heart attack. Collapsed while restocking a shelf at the market. The doctor said she'd been pushing herself too hard. Poor diet. Too much stress. But Derek knew the truth. She died of humiliation. She died knowing her only son was being destroyed from the inside. And she couldn't stop it. At the funeral, only 6 people came. No Vanessa, no Ellingtons, not even a single condolence text. Derek stood over the casket alone, a silent promise forming in his mind like smoke. They broke her. They laughed while they did it. And they'll never laugh again. The weeks that followed were blur and fire. Derek stopped drawing. He stopped eating. He stopped pretending. He quit his job at the cafe, sold his mother's remaining crafts, sold his old bike, stopped paying rent. He spent hours scrolling on his cracked phone, falling into forums and message boards about revenge, injustice, economic warfare, class betrayal. He read everything, soaked it in like scripture. One night, he reconnected with Malik, a former coworker from the cafe, now jobless, bitter, and volatile. Malik had spent 18 months in prison for robbery and blamed the world for every second. Malik introduced Derek to Trey, older, smarter, and colder. A former Marine dishonorably discharged. A man with nothing left to lose and a knack for planning. "You want justice?" Trey had asked. "No," Derek replied. "I want reckoning." They began watching the Ellington estate. Mapping cameras, studying guard rotations, noting when the maid came, when the gardener left, when Emma napped, when Monica went to yoga, when Charles held Zoom meetings in the wine cellar. It wasn't hard. The rich are predictable. They feel untouchable. But they weren't. Not anymore. Thanksgiving loomed again. The Ellingtons were hosting their annual family dinner. Guests would arrive. Staff would leave early. Security systems would be in guest mode. Vanessa still hadn't contacted him. Not once. The ring stayed on his nightstand, unopened. The rage in Derek simmered, sharp and cold now, not fiery. The plan was simple. Trey would cut the power. Malik would control the exits. Derek would decide who lived. He insisted on one thing. No one touches the baby. The other two laughed. But Derek didn't smile. He still remembered the way Emma's little hand used to grab his thumb. How she called him DD. How she once fell asleep on his chest, drooling on his shirt, and he didn't even care. She was innocent. She wasn't them. She would be spared. The night before the attack, Derek returned to his old apartment for the last time. He lit one of his mother's unsold candles, lavender and sage, sat on the floor, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mama. I tried to be good. I really tried." Then he placed the ring box in his pocket again, not for Vanessa, but for closure, for the ghost of a life he'd almost had. The hardest part wasn't the planning. It was the waiting. Derek sat in the back seat of Trey's 2003 Crown Victoria, the engine idling across the street from the Ellington estate. It was 6:47 p.m. on Thanksgiving night. The last of the guests had left. All the lights in the house were on except for the attic. Just like Vanessa had told him once, we never go up there. Too many memories. He used to love that about her, how she still believed in the past. Now, he just wondered how she'd scream. Trey chewed a toothpick between his molars. His eyes were cold, focused. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked without looking over. Derek didn't answer. He stared ahead, hands clenched on his thighs. Malik sat in the front passenger seat, assembling a modified handgun with eerie calm. "I mean, we can hit the place, grab the stuff, bounce," Malik said. "No need to go all Jason Voorhees unless you got something personal." Derek blinked slow. "It's all personal." They moved at 7:08 p.m. Power was cut from the junction box Trey had scoped out 3 days prior. The estate went dark. No alarms. Backup generator delayed by 15 seconds. Enough time for the team to slip in. They entered through the back patio, glass door left unlocked by Derek 3 weeks ago, when he pretended to accidentally leave something during a quick visit. He knew the layout by heart. Living room, main stairwell, security hub in the den. Charles Ellington was in his study when they reached him. He rose from his leather chair, confused by the darkness. "Vanessa," he called out. "Is that you?" Derek stepped forward. Charles squinted. "Wait a minute. Is that the waiter boy? What in the hell?" Bang. Malik pulled the trigger before the sentence finished. A single shot to the chest. Charles collapsed behind his mahogany desk. Blood soaked the carpet. Derek stared, frozen. This was it. No going back. They moved fast. Monica screamed upstairs. Trey shoved the housekeeper into a closet and zip-tied the door. Malik disabled the hallway camera with a crowbar. Derek headed for the nursery, Emma's room, just like they agreed. And then he heard it. A soft cry. Not a scream, just whimpering. Emma. He pushed open the door. The room was glowing faintly from a pink LED nightlight shaped like a unicorn. Emma was standing in her crib, tiny fists gripping the rail, eyes wet with confusion. "Dee," she whimpered. Derek's heart twisted. He rushed to her, scooped her up in his arms. She smelled like baby powder and milk. Her curls were messy. She laid her head on his shoulder without hesitation. "I'm sorry," he whispered, gently rocking her. "It's going to be okay. Just sleep, baby girl. You sleep through this." He pulled the small blanket from her crib, wrapped her in it, and carried her to the sitting room down the hall, the only room with soundproof insulation. He laid her on the couch, kissed her forehead, and hummed their old lullaby. "Hush now, little dove. Stars are up above." She closed her eyes, breathing steady. The soft sound of her suckling thumb broke his spirit in ways bullets couldn't. Meanwhile, Trey and Malik were moving through the house like shadows. Monica had locked herself in the master bedroom. Trey kicked the door in with one swift blow. She screamed, threw a lamp, hit nothing. "I have money," she shouted. "You don't have to do this." "You already did it," Derek said, stepping into the room behind them. She froze. When she saw his face, something in her eyes shifted. Not fear. Not regret. Contempt. "Of course it's you," she hissed. "Can't take rejection like a man, so you came here like a rat." Derek stepped closer, ignoring Trey's side glance. "You don't know what you destroyed." Monica tilted her chin. "I destroyed nothing. She never loved you." Derek's hand shook. "She pitied you." Monica spat. "You were a charity project. A game." Trey reached for his weapon. "No," Derek said coldly. "I do it." He grabbed the nearest object, a sculpted brass figurine from the dresser, and struck. Once. Twice. 3 times. The room went still. They found Vanessa in the guest room. She'd hidden there, thinking it would be the last place anyone looked. She heard the footsteps first, then saw the shadows under the door. When it opened, she gasped. "Derek!" She looked older, or maybe more afraid. He couldn't tell anymore. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Where's Emma?" "She's fine." Vanessa took a step forward. "Wait, is this... You did all this?" Derek's eyes were hollow. "You chose them." "I never chose. I didn't know this was happening." "You let them spit on my mother. You let them make me nothing." "I tried." Vanessa sobbed. "I tried to love you, but I was scared. They threatened to cut me off, to disown me." "I didn't want your money," Derek snapped. "I know. That's why it scared me." They stared at each other, 10 feet apart, but worlds away. "I still love you," she whispered. Derek closed his eyes. "That's the cruelest part," he said. He stepped forward. Vanessa flinched, but he didn't hit her. Not yet. He pulled the ring box from his coat and held it out. She opened it. Opal. Simple. Beautiful. Her breath caught. Then he took it back, closed it, and placed it in her hand. "So you know what you threw away." She didn't run. She didn't beg. She just cried. And then he stabbed her. Once in the stomach. Once in the heart. And he held her as she bled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I wanted it to be different." She died in his arms. Just like his mother. Just like the part of him that ever believed in happy endings. Trey and Malik regrouped at the back patio. Blood on their clothes. Derek joined them, breathing ragged. Malik asked, "We clear?" Derek nodded. He turned one last time toward the house. The lights still flickered. The smell of blood was thick. Emma was asleep in the other room, untouched, the only innocent. He made sure of it. They disappeared into the night. Derek ditched his bloody clothes in a storm drain. Trey burned the getaway car 2 counties over. Malik vanished off the grid. But the investigation would begin in hours, and there was no turning back. The scream came from across the street. It was 7:56 a.m. the next morning, Thanksgiving Friday, when Mrs. Nadine Baxter, the Ellingtons' elderly neighbor, stepped onto her porch to collect the paper. Her coffee cup slipped from her hand when she saw the front door of the Ellington estate wide open, swaying in the wind. The neighborhood was gated, quiet, rich. Doors didn't get left open. Not here. Not ever. Within 10 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived. By the time Officer Lauren Jenkins stepped into the foyer, the scent hit her first. Blood. And something else. Burned fabric? Perfume? No, it was baby powder. The house was still. Eerily still. Charles Ellington's body was found first. In his study, slumped backward in a pool of blood, a half-finished glass of whiskey beside him. 1 gunshot wound to the chest. Monica was discovered next in the master bedroom. Her skull was cracked open, blood matted into her silk pillowcases, the brass figurine still lying near her hand like a forgotten relic of violence. The hallway camera had been smashed. the alarm system tampered with. A methodical, silent storm had passed through the home. But it wasn't until they reached the guest room that the story changed. There, lying crumpled on the Persian rug, was Vanessa, a small ring box next to her, and her arms wrapped around her midsection as if still trying to hold something. Maybe hope. Maybe forgiveness. Got a baby, Officer Jenkins shouted moments later. They found her in the sitting room, wrapped in a pink blanket, fast asleep on the couch. Thumb in her mouth. No visible injuries. A unicorn night light blinked behind her. Her name, Emma, stitched onto the corner of the blanket. Detective Marcus Langford of the Fulton County Homicide Unit arrived an hour later. He crouched beside the toddler, gently adjusting the blanket, examining the faint smudge of blood on her sock. She saw it, he said grimly. She had to have seen something. Emma blinked awake. When she saw the uniform, she flinched. Then she pointed to the hallway and said one word, D.D. The next 48 hours were chaos. The media exploded. Thanksgiving massacre in Buckhead. Entire family slaughtered, baby survives. Ellington empire falls in blood. Every law enforcement division in Georgia wanted in. The governor made a statement. FBI profilers were looped in. But it was a small, red spiral notebook found in Vanessa's bedroom that cracked the case. A journal with dozens of entries about Derek. Some sweet, some confused, some guilty. One, dated just 3 weeks earlier, read, I still love him, but my parents will never allow it. They said if I see him again, I'll be cut off. I don't know what to do. Emma keeps asking about him. I miss the way he used to sing to her. God help me. I think I broke him. They pulled his name, ran facial recognition on his last driver's license, flagged his phone records. At 2:23 a.m. Sunday morning, they located a witness who saw Derek at a bus depot in Decatur, arguing with a man fitting Trey's description. Security footage showed the two leaving together in a silver Crown Victoria. One frame clearly captured Derek's profile. Bring him in, Langford said. Now. But they were already too late. Trey had gone underground. Malik had disappeared off the grid. And Derek? He was back where it all began. At the old candle booth in the flea market. He didn't know why he returned. Maybe guilt. Maybe he wanted to feel her presence again. His mother, Sharon. Her scent still lingered faintly in the wood. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His clothes smelled like smoke. His hands were still shaking. But inside there was no regret. Only silence. Until he heard a voice behind him. You know why we're here. Detective Langford. 2 officers flanking him, weapons drawn. Derek turned slowly, eyes red, sunken. I left the baby alive, he said softly. Langford nodded. What? Derek's jaw twitched. She's not like them. Who are they, Derek? Derek stepped forward. People who think love has a price tag. Who smile while they get your dignity. Who think money gives them the right to spit on everything you are. Langford said nothing. I loved her, Derek continued. I still do. That's the messed up part. He took something from his coat. The ring box. Opened it. She never even tried it on. The trial made national headlines. Prosecutors called it one of the most premeditated family slayings in recent Georgia history. Derek was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, home invasion, conspiracy to commit murder, and child endangerment. He refused to testify. His defense attorney pled insanity. He refused that too. I knew what I was doing, Derek said, calm as glass. And I'd do it again. Trey was arrested 3 weeks later in Tennessee. Malik was found in Louisiana 6 months after that, dead in a warehouse raid gone wrong. Shot twice in the chest. At Derek's sentencing, the courtroom was packed. Vanessa's surviving relatives sat on one side. Reporters filled the back row. Only one person sat alone near the front, a foster mother holding Emma, now 2. When Derek entered, Emma looked up. Their eyes met. She smiled. "Dee," she whispered. The room went still. Derek dropped his gaze. His hands clenched into fists. He never looked up again. The judge delivered 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. But the story didn't end there. A journalist from the Atlanta Tribune, following the trial, interviewed Derek one last time before he was transferred to federal prison. "You were the only one Emma remembered," she said. "She called you her angel." Derek chuckled bitterly. "I was the devil who loved her enough not to touch her." The journalist paused. "Do you think you're a monster?" Derek stared out the window. "No," he said. "I think I'm what happens when love and poverty collide in a world that only respects wealth." 6 weeks after the verdict, the city of Atlanta moved on. The Ellington mansion was quietly listed by a private broker for $12.8 million. No public open houses. No photos of the nursery. The unicorn night light was left behind, blinking weakly in an empty room. Detective Marcus Langford sat in his office one rainy afternoon in January, flipping through the final case file. Closed. 3 dead. 1 child orphaned. 1 monster behind bars. And yet, something didn't sit right with him. It wasn't just the blood, or the brutality, or even the public fascination with how a poor boy snapped. It was what Derek Carter never said. Derek had spoken only 3 times during the entire trial. Once to waive his right to an attorney-appointed mental health evaluation. Once to reject the insanity defense. And once, on the final day, when the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing. He stood there in an orange jumpsuit, chains on his wrists, looking more like a ghost than a man. The courtroom was packed. Cameras pointed. Reporters scribbled. Vanessa's relatives waited with rage boiling under the surface. But Derek's words weren't for them. He looked at the judge, then at Emma, sitting in the arms of her foster mother, and said, "All I ever wanted was a place at their table. Not to be served. To sit. To belong. It made me believe I was dirt. But love makes dirt feel like gold. Until it's ripped away, and you realize you were just their entertainment. I'm not sorry I ended it. I'm just sorry she never stood up." Then he sat down, and never spoke again. In prison, Derek refused interviews, except for one. A local filmmaker named Tracy Boone was shooting a documentary titled Blood on the Marble Steps, the Ellington Murders. It was part true crime, part sociological study. She wanted to understand not just the how of the murders, but the why. She wrote Derek weekly for 4 months before he finally agreed. Their meeting happened in the visitation room at Georgia State Prison. 1 camera, 1 microphone, 1 table. Tracy, a soft-spoken woman in her 40s, started with the obvious. "What happened to you, Derek?" He smiled, not cruelly, just tired. "You ever fall in love with someone who thinks they're rescuing you?" She nodded slightly. "It feels like being held and dissected at the same time," he said. "You crave it, but you know it's not real." Tracy leaned in. "Did you ever feel like Vanessa loved you?" Derek hesitated. She tried. I'll give her that. But love that can be turned off by a signature on a checkbook. That's not love. That's leverage. Emma was placed into the care of a foster family approved by the Ellington Estate's legal trustee. The Smiths. Older couple. No biological children. Retired teachers. Lived in Savannah. They didn't let the media near her. They moved her to a new preschool. Changed her last name. Cut ties with Atlanta. But some wounds don't bleed. They bruise. She would wake up crying some nights, babbling about unicorns and DD and the bang. At age 3, she drew a picture of a man in a hoodie with stars in his eyes. At 4, she asked her foster mother if monsters could love you and still hurt other people. The Smiths brought in therapists, child psychologists, trauma counselors. They did everything right, but some shadows arrive early and stay. At night, Emma would sometimes cry without making a sound. Not because she was told to be brave, but because no one knew what she had seen. Not even her. The trauma counselors called it memory fog, the brain's way of protecting itself. But fog still clings to skin. And in Emma's case, it clung to her dreams. She was 2 years old when she learned the word bang didn't just mean loud. It meant red. It meant screams. It meant her sister's face falling sideways, then never moving again. In the months after the murders, Emma refused to sleep in rooms with closed doors. She would scream, kick, bite, until the Smiths let her leave her bedroom door cracked open, just enough for the hallway light to kiss the floor beside her bed. Her therapist gave her a stuffed unicorn, lavender-scented, soft, with gold-stitched wings. Emma didn't let it go for almost a year. One morning, Mrs. Smith found her sitting under the kitchen table, rocking slightly, whispering a lullaby. "Hush now, little dove. Stars are up above." It was the same song Derek used to hum, the one he sang the night he killed her family. No one taught her that song. It lived in her like a shadow. When Emma was 3, she drew her first memory. Crayons on butcher paper, blue sky, big house, tiny girl, and beside the house, a tall figure in gray, holding a baby. The head was smiling. The hands were red. When the Smiths asked who it was, she said, D. Emma rarely spoke about him, but he was always there in her drawings, in her play, in a way she flinched when she saw men in hoodies. At school, she struggled with trust. She didn't like being touched. She would sometimes lash out when classmates played pretend with bad guys and police. She didn't like when anyone used the word monster, because in her world, monsters had lullabies. At age 5, Emma asked her foster mother a question she hadn't expected. If someone kills bad people, does that make them good? Mrs. Smith didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, "Why do you ask?" Emma replied, without looking up, "Because Dee only hurt the ones who yelled at me." That night, she drew a picture of herself standing between 2 large people, stick figures with angry eyebrows. Behind her stood Derek, arms stretched wide like wings. One hand had a heart, the other a knife. The therapist called it dual imprinting, a fractured lens where the abuser is also the comforter. Emma called it the part of him that held me. Her therapist encouraged her to write letters to people she missed. She wrote one to Vanessa. It read, "I miss your hair. You used to make it tickle my face. I miss you reading stories. I miss your necklace that looked like the moon. I hope you're not mad I stayed." She didn't write to Derek. But one day, she brought home a rock from the school playground. She drew a tiny heart on it with red Sharpie and placed it in a shoebox labeled his. As Emma grew older, her trauma changed shape. By age 7, she could articulate what she remembered: the sound of glass breaking, her mother screaming, the hush of Derek's voice, the wet heat on his shirt when he held her. She never cried when she spoke about it. She just drifted, like a girl remembering a fairy tale that turned into a nightmare halfway through. She once told a substitute teacher during show and tell, "I used to have a sister, but someone made her sleep forever." The teacher cried during lunch. Emma didn't understand why. At 9, when the Smiths told her the full truth, she sat very still. No questions, no tears, just silence. Then, I already knew. That night, she opened the unicorn's belly seam. Inside, she had tucked a crumpled photo of Derek, one that had been in a newspaper years ago. She placed it on her nightstand beside the rock and whispered, "You were bad, but you were warm, and I still don't know what to do with that." Her therapist later wrote in her file, "Asterisk, Emma displays signs of deep emotional intelligence, but is in danger of internalizing confusion as guilt. If not guided properly, she may grow to believe that love and violence are intertwined." Asterisk. 1 week later, Emma asked to visit him, not out of forgiveness, not out of pity, but out of unfinished music, a lullaby that still played in the back of her mind. and maybe somewhere inside, she just wanted to know if the hands that held her once had ever meant to let her go. Years passed. The Ellington murders faded from front pages. A few true crime podcasts brought it back briefly. One even dramatized the events into a fictionalized audiobook. But the public had new crimes to chase, new blood to analyze. Only two people never forgot: Derek Carter, Emma Grace Ellington. When Emma turned 9, the Smith sat her down and told her the truth. All of it. She didn't cry. She didn't ask many questions. She just said, "I already knew." Then she went to her room and sat for hours with a worn stuffed unicorn. That night, she left a note on the table. "I want to see him." The Smiths consulted her therapist. The therapist agreed. "Closure," she said, "comes in many forms." The prison made special arrangements. The visit would be non-contact. Recorded. One-way glass. Emma sat in a small room, wearing a navy coat and holding a notebook with shaking hands. Derek walked in from the other side of the glass, older now, grayer, gaunter, but the same. When he saw her, he stopped and smiled, not with joy, but with something else: regret, love, recognition. Emma picked up the phone first. Derek followed. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi, baby girl," he replied, voice cracking. They sat in silence for nearly a minute. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "Why didn't you hurt me?" Derek closed his eyes. "Because you were the only thing in that house that knew how to love without conditions." Emma's lip trembled. "Do you still hate them?" "No," he whispered. "Hate's a fire. Fires burn out, but ash stays." She nodded, then looked down. "I'm okay now," she said. "I have a new name, a new family." Derek smiled through the glass. "Good," he said. "Be better than me." She nodded again, then left, and never came back. A month later, Tracy Boone released her documentary. It opened with a quote from Derek. "They say monsters are born, but sometimes they're made in kitchens where no one talks, at tables where no one listens, in houses with too many doors and not enough warmth." The film ended with Emma's voice reading from her notebook. "I still call him DD, not because I forgive him, but because I remember the part of him that wasn't broken, the part that sang to me when no one else would." 15 years later, no one remembered the exact date of the murders. The Ellington estate had been demolished and replaced by a minimalist glass mansion owned by a cryptocurrency billionaire. The street had new houses, new gates, new names. No plaques, no markers, no memory. But scars don't need monuments to survive. They live in people. Emma Grace Smith, formerly Emma Ellington, was now 17. A straight-A student, captain of the debate team, quiet, thoughtful, always carrying a sketchbook no one was allowed to see. Every Thanksgiving, she withdrew a little. The noise, the lights, the smell of turkey, it made her stomach twist. But she never said why. Only her therapist knew the full story. Only she had the drawings. One in particular stood out: a child in a crib, surrounded by shadows. One shadow, tall, thin, with kind eyes, sat beside the crib, singing. The words scribbled beneath it read, "He wasn't all evil, but even angels can bleed." Back in Georgia State Prison, Derek Carter had become a ghost. He spoke little, read a lot, painted small canvases with jailhouse acrylics, mostly landscapes and children's faces. He refused visitors, refused parole hearings, refused pity. He lived, as one guard said, like a man who already died once. One rainy April morning, Derek collapsed in the prison yard. Massive stroke, dead before the ambulance arrived. They found only one thing in his cell: a wooden box. Inside it were two things: the original engagement ring, a folded piece of paper with shaky handwriting. It read, "She was the only light left. I kept the fire, but she kept the warmth. Tell her, I never meant for her to live in the dark." The state tried to contact Emma. The Smiths shielded her as always. But this time, she asked for the letter. She didn't cry when she read it. She didn't smile either. She simply placed it inside her notebook between the drawing of the unicorn and the one of the man in the hoodie. And she whispered, "I hope you found your mother." The documentary Blood on the Marble Steps eventually became part of a high school sociology curriculum in select schools across the U.S. It was no longer about shock value. It was about systems, class, pride, silence, and the slow rot of unspoken cruelty. Tracy Boone's final voiceover in the documentary was simple. Some stories are not about monsters. They're about people who were never given space to grieve. So they made the world grieve with them. On the 20th anniversary of the Ellington murders, a journalist from The Atlantic tracked down Emma, now a PhD candidate in psychology at NYU. She had published 2 papers on trauma bonding and generational grief. When asked if she remembered Derek, she said, "I remember his humming. I remember that he held me like I mattered. I also remember the blood, the silence, the cold." When the journalist asked if she forgave him, she paused, then said, "Forgiveness is not always about excusing the past. Sometimes it's about refusing to carry it forward." That night, she stood by her window, rain streaking the glass like tears the sky didn't ask permission to shed. In her hand was the ring she wore on a chain around her neck, not as a memory of love, but as a reminder that sometimes love isn't enough. In the years that followed the documentary's release, Blood on the Marble Steps became more than a cautionary tale. It became a curriculum. Sociology departments across the country dissected the Ellington case not just as a crime, but as a case study in class warfare, inherited trauma, and the psychology of being unwanted. Was Derek Carter a murderer? Undeniably. But was he only that? That was the debate. At Howard University, a lecture hall of 300 students debated for 3 hours over one prompt. Is it still murder if the motive is humiliation? One student said, "He's a killer. End of story." Another replied, "Maybe, but so were the people who laughed when he was starving." In an episode of NPR's Hidden America, a panel of sociologists, ex-offenders, and child psychologists discussed Derek's case. Dr. Alice Mahoney, a trauma expert, said something that silenced the room. "We always ask why poor kids snap, but we never ask what kind of world we built that made snapping the only way to be heard." One ex-prisoner on the panel, once sentenced for robbery at age 16, nodded slowly. "People say Derek was broken. I think he was overexposed to pain, to being told he's less, to watching doors close that were never meant for him to open." He paused. When you grow up watching people eat steak while your mom cries over a shut-off notice, you don't dream of revenge. You dream of being enough. And when that dream dies, something colder is born. Vanessa's family sued the documentary team for glorifying a killer. They lost. The judge's statement read, "Truth is not glorification. It is dissection, and sometimes dissection hurts." 10 years later, Emma, now a doctoral student at NYU, delivered a TEDx talk titled, "What We Carry from the Fire." She stood on a bare stage, wearing black, her voice steady. "I was 2 years old when I lost everything. My family, my safety, my understanding of what love means. But I also remember being held, not by a savior, not by a father, by the man who caused it all. And that contradiction shaped me." She paused. We want monsters to be easy, to be obvious. But what if the monster knew how to hum lullabies? What if the villain was also the only one who saw you? What if your safest memory came from the most dangerous man? She ended with a slide showing a simple dinner table. 4 chairs, one empty. I believe all violence begins at empty tables. Where love should be, but isn't. Where no one listens. Where someone speaks, and the world answers with silence. Thunderous applause. Tears in the front row. Later that year, Time listed Emma Gray Smith in its next 100 leaders shaping the cultural conversation in America. Her quote printed beneath the photo read, "I don't forgive him, but I understand the silence that made him, and I refuse to be silent in return." Back in Georgia, a small exhibit opened at a local museum. The Cost of Silence, the Ellington Files. It included the ring Derek never gave, the stuffed unicorn Emma kept for 15 years, and a voice recording of Derek reading from a prison letter. Monsters don't always growl. Sometimes they whisper, "Please see me. Please hear me." And when no one does, they roar. And maybe that was the lesson. Not that love can save everyone. Not that wealth makes you untouchable. Not even that silence kills. But this. Sometimes people don't snap out of hate. They snap out of longing that was never returned.